er nicht. Nein, das ist nicht nett. Genau.
The girl's eyes were filled with helplessness and despair. She used all her remaining strength to turn her head toward her companion, but she realized her companion's face had already turned dark from the cold. At that moment, the girl understood she might never escape this place. Yet the cruelest part was still ahead. Just as they were about to pass out from the freezing bath, a nurse suddenly pulled them out of the tub. They were then dragged into a shower room. This time, scalding hot water was poured over their bodies. But even that wasn't the end. The girl was then taken to an even more terrifying place. A place without a single ray of light. Only endless darkness and silence. After being locked inside for 3 days and 3 nights, her body and mind, under constant torment, were on the brink of collapse. You might think this was a prison, but in fact, this was the Salpêtrière asylum of 19th century Europe. Back then, medicine was primitive. The way mental illness was diagnosed and treated was extremely brutal. It wasn't really treatment at all, it was control. What no one realized, however, was that the girl was never a criminal. She was actually Casey, the daughter of the city's wealthiest family, bright, educated, and full of spirit. Casey had little patience for the rigid etiquette forced on women. Her family wanted her to be a refined lady, but Casey insisted on living her own way. And she had a gift: she could see the departed and communicate with spirits. Not long ago, she confessed this secret to her father, but he feared it would ruin the family's reputation, so he made a heartless decision. One morning, Casey's mother told her they were going to a ball. Casey dressed in her finest gown and carefully applied her makeup. Her father and younger brother accompanied her, but when they arrived at their destination, Casey immediately sensed something was wrong. This was no ballroom. It was the Salpêtrière asylum, a place that admitted only women. Casey resisted with all her strength, but it was useless. The moment she entered, her clothes were stripped away. Even her hair was thoroughly examined. Inside this place, human rights meant nothing. Women were locked together in dormitories. They could only eat and sleep on schedule, and if they disobeyed, they would be taken away to face harsh punishment. Within days, Casey realized that very few women here were truly ill. Most were sent by their families or husbands, for reasons as trivial as disobedience or defiance, and anyone who resisted or tried to escape would face severe consequences. These so-called treatments were so cruel that even a healthy person could be broken. That's why it was called an asylum. Everyone inside was eventually labeled as mentally ill. In this place, Casey met a beautiful young woman named Louise. She wasn't sick at all, naive, kind-hearted, and a little too straightforward. She had simply refused her father's unreasonable demands, and for that, she was thrown in here. Because Louise was attractive and obedient, she was often chosen to perform for wealthy patrons. This time, Louise was brought out again. A hypnotist placed her under a trance. He told her to raise her hand, to slowly move it from her stomach up to her lips. This immersive display fascinated the audience of aristocrats. But in the very next moment, Louise began gasping for air. She collapsed to the ground, her body convulsing uncontrollably. The scene instantly caught the attention of the wealthy patrons. They thought it was just another part of the show. One by one, they stood up to get a better look, but none of them realized the truth. Louise had suffered a seizure, triggered by the hypnosis. When she returned, because she wasn't treated in time, she was left paralyzed on one side of her body and would never walk again for the rest of her life. Witnessing this, Casey grew terrified. She didn't want to end up like that. She had to find a way to escape, and the only way now was to prove she could see the departed, that she wasn't mentally ill. After much thought, Casey approached Nurse Julie, hoping she would help, but Julie assumed Casey was having an episode. That is, until Casey described the appearance of Julie's deceased sister. Even then, Julie was still skeptical, but when Casey revealed the exact spots where her sister had birthmarks, Julie was stunned. With Julie's help, the doctors agreed to re-examine Casey, but the moment the doctor saw how strikingly beautiful she was, he began to scheme. He thought, if Casey was forced to perform for wealthy patrons, she would be extremely popular, so letting her go was out of the question. When the doctor learned Casey could see the departed, he declared this ability to be abnormal. After all, healthy people weren't supposed to see such things. This left Casey shaken. She demanded to know why another girl, one who claimed she had seen God just days ago, was released without question. The doctor was caught off guard. He quickly brushed it off. insisting Casey was seriously ill. Then he scheduled her for brutal treatments twice a week. These so-called treatments forced patients into tubs of ice, where they were submerged until they could no longer feel their bodies. After that, boiling hot water was poured over them for long stretches of time. This extreme process broke the will of anyone who resisted, leaving them completely submissive. Julie tried her best, but she couldn't free Casey. Instead, Casey was subjected to these punishments, but Julie longed to connect with her sister again, so she approached Casey once more. She promised that if Casey could help her speak to her sister, she would protect Casey from the next round of torment. The two slipped into an empty room. Casey tried to sense the presence of spirits, but at first, nothing happened. Julie grew impatient and was about to leave. Then suddenly, Casey's body began to tremble. Her breathing grew rapid. Julie realized her sister's spirit must have arrived and rushed forward, eager to speak, but Casey stopped her. She warned Julie that it wasn't her sister, it was her father, and he was in danger in the kitchen. Julie didn't quite believe it, but just in case, she hurried home. When she rushed into the kitchen, her father wasn't there. Relieved, she sat down, but then, she noticed bloodstains on the handkerchief on the table. Her heart skipped a beat. Julie dashed upstairs, and there she found her father collapsed on the floor. Thankfully, she had returned in time. Her father's life was spared. At that moment, Julie completely believed Casey. She made up her mind when she got back, she would arrange Casey's release. But before that could happen, Casey once again spoke out against the doctor, and for that, she was dragged off for treatment yet again. This time, Casey was locked inside a room with only a skylight. The skylight was open just 2 minutes a day. The rest of the time, Casey was left drowning in endless darkness, with no sense of time and no light at all. Her mind was on the verge of breaking. Just as she was about to collapse, Julie came. She told Casey to hold on a little longer. Very soon, she would find a way to get her out. Julie went to the doctor again, insisting that Casey was now completely obedient and could be released. Coincidentally, the asylum was about to host a grand masquerade ball for the wealthy in just 2 days. Julie immediately began making preparations. Through letters, she arranged with Casey's younger brother to help her escape during the ball. On the day of the masquerade, the naive young women dressed themselves up with excitement, but the moment they stepped out, impatient rich men began groping them and speaking with vulgar words. Some were even more depraved, preferring women in wheelchairs. Because they couldn't move easily, they were easier to abuse. Soon, Louise was dragged into a room by one of the men. He began to assault her violently. Fortunately, another patient happened to discover it. She rushed in and saved Louise, even beating the man to the ground. At that moment, Casey spotted her brother in the crowd. She instantly realized this was all part of Julie's plan. Calmly, she walked forward and began to dance with him. She knew a nurse was watching her nearby, so she had to stay vigilant at every moment. At last, the two of them slipped into the crowd. Julie, who had been waiting all along, hurried over to help them change into new clothes. Hidden under the cover of the crowd, they rushed toward the exit, but just as they entered the corridor, they were discovered by the orderlies. At the critical moment, a fellow patient bravely stepped in and dragged the orderly back. It bought Casey just enough time to escape. Soon, they reached the front doors. Outside, the carriage her brother had prepared was already waiting, but just as they were about to get in, the orderlies and guards came chasing after them. In that moment of crisis, Julie slammed the door shut. She chose to stay behind, buying Casey precious time. Casey pleaded with her to escape together, but Julie shook her head. She said staying behind was the only way she could atone for her past. Casey was heartbroken but had no choice. Under Julie's urging, she finally left. Julie was arrested as a traitor and locked away. Meanwhile, Casey, who had escaped, did not return to the cold and heartless home that had betrayed her. Instead, she went to live by the sea. There, she looked upon the vast ocean and finally felt spiritual freedom. In the days that followed, she and Julie exchanged letters often. Each lived her own life, carrying the other in her heart. In the end, the film closes with Julie trading her own freedom to secure Casey's. Together, they completed a shared path of redemption, yet the countless women trapped by the prison of that era stripped of freedom and dignity were far too many for a single film to tell their stories in full.